Well, Kasey, the Boston Fleet just missed a huge potential win. They seem to go into overtime with this Montreal team every single time they play them. They lost in OT 3-2 in Agganis Arena in Massachusetts, which was kind of a bummer, but they'll have the opportunity to get back there at some point. But what did you think about this game?
Oh my gosh. Well, as I mentioned, my chaotic weekend, it did also consist of being at the Boston Fleet game. So Boston versus Montreal. This has kind of been a great matchup throughout the season. So we know PWHL, just 6 teams, but when you can get that consistency seeing a team, it almost gets harder to beat them. Montreal's the number 1 team in the PWHL right now for a number of reasons, but I think Boston be able to push this to overtime, yet again, Boston be able to stay in this fight with a team that's just so dynamic right now. It gives you a lot of hope. They've had a decent climb over their past 5 to 10 games, just kind of showing how well they can get into better positioning for the playoffs that are coming up here shortly. So as for that game more specifically, you saw them make quick adjustments. You saw them be able to kind of keep their head in it because for the most part, and it's funny because my mom was sitting in the stands by herself. I was running around working a bit. And my mom texts me and she goes, how come every time the Montreal gets on their side of the ice to try to score, there's so many of them and so much opportunity. And then when Boston gets to their side, it's not as many of them. And I'm like, look at how smart she is.
There you go.
So it's they're making adjustments for their coverage. You've got a lot of dynamic offensive players, and then you've got some defensive players that just need a little bit more help or speed on that back end when it comes to backtracking. So Montreal, fastest team out there right now. They've got a lot of offensive weapons. So Boston's staying in it, and they're taking good strides to head towards a postseason. I don't look too deeply into it. Between Montreal and Boston, both goaltenders keep shifting for position 1 and position 2 in the rankings. So there's just this fun go back and forth. Boston's ability to bounce back into games. We talked with Natalie Norrie about it. Like, they are a really good comeback team, and that's kind of that extra gusto that you need if you're going to make a postseason run. So I think Boston's in a good spot. I think it was really disappointing for them to lose in overtime on Saturday, but if you're going to lose to a team, Montreal's the team to lose to.
Definitely. Well, they've been in this overtime position many times. I think 8 out of the 11 times that they've played Montreal, including the playoffs, which is absolutely crazy. But just like you kind of said, like, they need to find a way at the end to get that win, right? Like, it can't just be, late in the game when they start to get their footing. And that's what Boston head coach Courtney Kessel said. She said another overtime game versus Montreal, which was kind of funny. She's like, oh, another, that was her opening statement.
Here
another
we go
overtime
again.
game against Montreal. I feel like it's something we like to do. I think our last 40 was much better than our first 20, so we have to find a way to come out and make an impact in the first 20. Is there a player on this Boston Fleet team who you feel like will be able to get the Fleet over the hump of really making that first punch and getting a score on the scoreboard earlier in one of the periods?
Absolutely. And that's actually a great question because building off of what she said, they've got to find a way to show up in the first 20. And that's kind of been the theme of their entire season. Now, on the front end of the season, they were all very much still trying to find their identity in a number of ways. Every individual player was trying to kind of solidify their role so that they knew what that looked like in order to compete. With that being said, kind of just touching back to the adjustments that I mentioned, they almost wait till that second period to make adjustments where it's like they need to be more of tone setters in that first period. And I love that you asked about a player because Hillary Knight, she's the player that can set the tone early in the first period for this Boston Fleet team, and they can build off of her getting things going, setting the tone, pulling momentum in their favor. And you're starting to see that in her play. You're starting to see how the players can rally around her when she has the initial the initial tone-setting play. So last week, you saw some tremendous things out of Hillary Knight, which nobody should be surprised about. But I think she's the one who can take a lead role in setting the opening tone and having some opening scoring opportunities. They're feeling out their opponent too much in that first 20. They're getting back in the game in the second period, and then there's this toe-to-toe motion all throughout the third period. And that's what I mean by they're a great comeback team. So it's great to see they have that ability, but they've got to come out swinging harder in the first.
It's fear for your opponents when you know they're good in the third period.
Oh, yeah.
But still, the game is really won in all of the entirety of the game. But another bright spot, though, for the Fleet was that they got to play in Agganis Arena, which is a really iconic and fun and exciting place to play. Downtown Boston, it's where BU plays, and just can imagine that there were a lot of, BU hockey fans there and maybe some younger girls in the Boston area that were able to go. It was a sold-out game. It was the Fleet's, I think, second sold-out game of the season, which was just so absolutely crazy. So could you just speak from being there what that environment was like?
Oh, my gosh. It was honestly overwhelming in the best way possible, because you did see a lot of BU jerseys and like them representing former females that have played at such a historic arena, for one, and for two, it was sold out. But just to see so many men and women and so many boys and girls there to support the Fleet team, like I can even say I didn't expect that, and I hate to say something like that, you know what I mean?
Well, if you've never seen it, then you're not going to expect it.
Exactly. Right? So I mentioned that my mom was sitting by herself in the stands. I think she was like section 114, so I ran upstairs to check on her a couple of times, and
hey, you good? Just checking. You having fun?
Like, you situated? Are you sitting around any crazy people? But she wasn't. So even the camaraderie in the stands, I mean, we're not from here. My mom's not from here. And then furthermore, my mom's foreign, you know, she's obsessed with hockey because of me. So she said that she was sitting in the stands and like everybody was just like so excited to talk about and like inform about the Boston Fleet, about where professional hockey for women has grown, and like see these young girls in the stands wearing these jerseys, just wanting to become these women that are on the ice, and moreover wanting to become the coaches. I mean, my mom was like learning about Seattle Kraken's assistant coach while she's there, you know, at a Boston Fleet game. So just the existence of this conversation being so normal, for one, but for two, the excitement and the hype around it, it was just like my mom didn't want to leave, because I was like, well, it's been a long day, I'm tired, I'm done with work, we can head out now. Yeah. And she's like, no, I have to know what happens. Like, she was bought in from top to bottom with this entire experience. And you know, while we want to stick to highlighting the Boston Fleet, it was everything about it. I mean, she loved watching all of the players for both the Fleet and Montreal. So I have to say that the atmosphere was amazing. Good. I ran into Natalie. She was running 100 million miles per hour also, but she had a lot of work to do that day, that's for sure.
That's awesome. Well, it is super exciting, and that's where it's continuing to go, right? Like Charlotte North, she's the team leader of this new WLL Boston Guard team for women's lacrosse. That will be the pro team in Boston. She got to drop a puck at one of their recent games and talk to the team beforehand. And so you see like the combination of just the Boston Fleet really embracing themselves as a Boston pro sports team, but then also really welcoming on the new Boston sports teams and even Boston Nation. There was a social media collab on the Boston Fleet Instagram, and it was like a TikTok trend that I hadn't seen, truthfully, but it was like you step on the phone and then you pick it up and it's somebody new, and it went from the Boston Fleet to the WLL with Charlotte North, and then the Boston Nation, some of those players, and that's a team that we'll see eventually. But I do think that playing off the excitement of the arena, I think that's the whole atmosphere that we're really going to get in the city of Boston with pro women's sports.
Well, yeah, because like if you think about it, location sometimes is half the battle and half the draw. You know, like people out of curiosity might just want to be like, okay, let's pop into BU Arena. I've heard so much about it. Then
it's
you get there.
It's a tourist place. It really is. Yeah,
it really, really is. And even again, I didn't even realize the magnitude of it. So I mean, at one point, I'm sure my mom was walking around and she's just like looking at all the trophy cases and all the things and sending me all these questions while I'm at work. And it was just really cool because the experience pulls you in from so many different avenues, but the arena is one that's going to welcome fans in and spark curiosity. And I think that definitely started. I mean, you said it, a sold out crowd. Now knowing consistently that's going to be there, more people are going to be curious, more people are going to come in and take a look, and then you're going to be battling it out for tickets. I mean, potentially, I'm trying to kidnap you to the game at the end of the month.
I know, I got to go. This was a great, like, welcome in. I got to get to one of those games, and even just, like, this show at some point is going to be WLL, Boston Fleet, Boston Nation. It's going to be packed, so I love it, and I'm excited, and what a fun weekend.
Oh, my gosh, absolutely. And then something else to add to the atmosphere and everything is, you know, I think I kind of mentioned it, or if I didn't, I would forgive me, everyone. We're 8 games away from the postseason, and the PWHL has a very unique playoff style, which I had to ask Natalie and get clarification on, because I'm like, I think I heard you correctly, but I'm not sure. So there's only 6 teams in the PWHL. The first seed gets to pick from the 3rd or the 4th and choose who they want to compete against. Now, once the season wraps, they've got 24 hours to decide if they're going to go for the 3rd ranked team or the 4th ranked team. And that makes you feel like, don't you have a little bit of an upper hand there, like to be able to choose if you want to go against 3 or 4? But it's also extra important right now, especially for any hockey heads out there, because the Boston Fleet have climbed from the 4th ranking to the 3rd ranking, and they're tied there, but they're looking to make a move to take over 2nd place. And the momentum that they have right now, the way that they have been playing, they're getting very well poised in position to do just that. And the other thing that I've noticed too, which I should have added to the Montreal conversation, because they see their opponents so often and because they're kind of that comeback team, after playing a couple times, they find a way to beat their opponent. The Minnesota Frost was a pain to the Boston Fleet all season long. They had a small break. Once they got back from that break, then they finally had an opportunity to beat the Frost. And ever since then, their game has just climbed from then on out. So it's exciting because now we're looking to a postseason. And if they hop out of that number 3 spot, then they're going to be in a decision-making seat and hopefully be able to find themselves in a position to compete as a champion.
You want to be in the driver's seat. That is dangerous. And, man, it's kind of like you're looking like, I'm going to take on you.
Yes.
I absolutely love it.
It's so wild. Like, when I first got that, I was like, Natalie, I'm not reading this or digesting it correctly.
It's very unique, but I think that's kind of what adds to when you start a new league and you have something that, the people around you haven't seen. You kind of got to do different things, right? Especially if you only have 6 teams. But that is all exciting. I'm excited to keep up with the PWHL and the Boston Fleet specifically. They're very close to that number 2 seed. I think they're only a point away from Toronto and catching up to them. But if you're enjoying the show, you can catch new episodes of Respect Her Game every Tuesday. You can watch on YouTube and Twitch and listen on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts.